Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Brian Danforth. Good to see all of you here. I am the Assistant Vice President for Development and Interim Executive Director of the UF Alumni Association. Happy Friday, Go Gators. Thank you again for joining us today for another installment of the UF Alumni Association's Resources webinar today, featuring conversation and dialogue about Juneteenth. Very, very important day in the history of our country. So whether you're joining us through the webinar itself or through Facebook Live, definitely thrilled to have all of you here taking time out of your busy schedules. Today we have an esteemed group of panelists and moderators that will help lead the discussion on Juneteenth and Black heritage events within the UF community. I encourage you, we all encourage you, please, to submit your questions for the panelists via the Q&A or chat features on the webinar or within the comment section of Facebook. We'll have somebody moderating both so that we can keep track of all of your questions and comments. Before we get started, let me first just introduce our two moderators for today, one being Ms. Jocelyn Moore. Jocelyn is a proud double Gator of the University of Florida, having received a BA in English from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, as well as a Master's of Education in Student Personnel in Higher Education from the College of Education. She currently serves as an independent director on the board of DraftKings, a publicly traded technology company, and is a senior advisor at the New Markets Support Company. Jocelyn is also a member of both the University of Florida Foundation National Board of Directors, as well as serving on the Audit and Nominating Committees. She's also a part of the UF Alumni Association Board of Directors as well, where she serves on the Executive Committee. So Jocelyn, thank you for all of your support that you lend to the University of Florida and the many ways that you do that. Our co-moderator today is somebody that I get to have the privilege and honor of working with every day, and that is Heather Ashley. Heather is the Senior Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Florida. So happy to have both Jocelyn and Heather here today. Please join me in welcoming them as they help begin this important discussion. I'll kick it over to Heather and Jocelyn. Thank you.
Brian, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Go Gators, and good afternoon to everyone joining us here today. Before we introduce our esteemed panelists, I'd like to start with a few intentions to guide this important discussion. Our first intention is for today's dialogue to be as authentic, transparent, and informative as possible. So having said that, there will be points made about past and current struggles of the Black community in and around UF that are very difficult to hear. However, this conversation comes from a place of shared commitment to making all the communities in which we find ourselves, including the University of Florida community, better and more inclusive. Our second intention, which closely relates to the first, is that this is a safe space to learn, engage, and grow. So to everyone in our audience, we ask that you open your hearts and minds and use your listening ears so that we can charge a constructive and healing path forward together. So with that, let's introduce our esteemed panelists. Heather.
Thank you so much for that, Jocelyn. We're excited that everybody's gathered here today. Looking forward to a great conversation, great dialogue. Very timely considering some of the recent news. So with that, I'd like to get started introducing our panelists. First, we have Dr. Vincent Adejumo. Dr. Vincent Edward Aluwali Adejumo is currently a senior lecturer of African American Studies and affiliate senior lecturer of political science at UF, as well as the founder of the Olu Institute of Learning. He currently teaches Intro to African American Studies, The Wire, Mentoring at-Risk Youth, Black Wall Street, and Black Masculinity. Due to his continued involvement and reputation for teaching at UF, Dr. Adejumo was selected as the Professor of the Year by the UF Black Student Union for the 2015-2016 school year. He was also selected as the Professor and Advisor of the Year by the UF College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for the 2017-2018 school year. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Adejumo. Next, we have Quentin Morgan. Quentin is an attorney with the South Florida law firm Gorin, Cheroff, Duty, and Ezerl. He is a triple Gator and is the president-elect of the Association of Black Alumni. Please help me welcome Quentin. Cherise Tracy is our next panelist. She is a third-year international studies major with a minor in international development and humanitarian aid. Cherise has been involved with BSU since her freshman year, participating in capacities such as leadership and development and philanthropy director. Now, as president of BSU, she continues to make BSU a home for Black students and contribute to the Black experience at UF. Please help me welcome Cherise. Our other student representative is Spencer Davis. Spencer is a fourth-year accounting major from Huntsville, Alabama. Currently, Spencer serves as a Senate Secretary for Student Government, the Peer Leader Coordinator for the Black Male Excellence Network, and the chapter president for the Zeta Kappa chapter of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. Please help me welcome Spencer. And last, but certainly not least, we have Carl Van Ness. Carl is the Florida Political Papers activist in the Department of Special and Area Studies Collections in the George A. Smathers Library. He has been with the library since 1984. He has served as the university's official historian since 2006 and had previously served as the university archivist from 1997 to 2003. In addition to writing and lecturing about the university's history, Carl gives walking tours of the historic campus when the weather and, of course, COVID permits. Please help me welcome all of our panelists today. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jocelyn to begin the conversation.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you again to all of our panelists. Dr. Adejumo, let's start with you. Yesterday, President Biden signed legislation into law making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Many in the African American community have long celebrated Juneteenth as America's second Independence Day. However, Juneteenth is largely unknown to most Americans. Can you talk a little bit about the historical significance of Juneteenth? What is Juneteenth? And in your response, can you also discuss why Juneteenth is actually not the date emancipation is celebrated in the state of Florida?
And thank you, Jocelyn. So Juneteenth happened in 1865, obviously June 19th, when General Granger arrived in Galveston and read the Proclamation for Freedom to Texas. Texas was the last state in the, I was about to say Union, but really in the Confederacy, to allow enslaved Africans or Africans to be enslaved, right? So it was 250,000 enslaved people in that state still. And what happened was that the original Emancipation Proclamation happened in 1863, January 1st. But, you know, obviously the Confederacy was still in rebellion and they were still fighting. And so the Union won. And so the last of the states was Texas. Now, the controversy that a lot of people, people say, well, we shouldn't celebrate Juneteenth in Florida. And the reason why people say that is because in Florida, Juneteenth actually, or not Juneteenth, but the Emancipation document was read in Tallahassee on May 20th. So that's why many people say, well, in Florida it's really May 20th, but in my personal opinion, so I just gave you the historical facts, but in my personal opinion, I think Juneteenth still should be celebrated, not only in the state of Florida, but everywhere, because if one of our sisters and brethren are enslaved, then none of us are truly free. So it doesn't really matter if it was, May 20th or wherever other state, if the last of us are still enslaved, then and read our papers, then that's what you celebrate. Now, the thing about it is I would even go a step further. Me personally, I think it's a great thing, but slavery wasn't really officially abolished until the 13th Amendment. So that didn't occur until December of 1865. So in my opinion, I think that is more so worth celebrating, but then there's controversy with that because it didn't really end slavery, as most of us have watched the 13th movie. If you educate yourself on that, slavery is still alive and well. It's just what the 13th Amendment did was abolish chattel slavery, right? Chattel slavery. But obviously, we know if you are in bondage, if you are in the prison system, that is still technically a form of enslavement, So that's really the gist of it. And as I said, I think it's worth celebrating or recognizing, but there's still a lot to get to, and obviously we're going to be discussing on this panel, so I don't want to take up too much time. But just to wrap it up on that point, I think another thing that's worth discussing is reparations. I think that is something more so to strive for. Many people say, yeah, we should have a national holiday, but I believe that reparations and specific tangibles for African Americans is the most important goal, just as other groups in this country receive specific tangibles to help their plight in this country. I think that should be the ultimate goal to help eliminate eventually the equity and economic gap between African Americans that still exists today between African Americans and other ethnic groups and white Americans in this country.
So Dr. Adejumo, that was very helpful. And I love that you're already thinking about solutions and ideas that we can put on the table to help us move forward. So let's put a pin in that. We're going to come back to the solutions discussion a little bit later on. But one of the things I did want to ask is, for our audience, can you define what chattel slavery and bondage means, and the link that you made to that, to our present day prison system? I do want to underscore that before we move on.
Sure. So when we're talking about chattel slavery, we're talking about being forced to be in bondage, and the system not only just being forced to be in bondage, but the system that is in place to ensure that those people remain in bondage and at the bottom of society. In fact, chattel slave, when you talk about chattel slavery, African Americans were not even considered people or humans, as evidenced by Justice Chief Taney's ruling in 1857, the Dred Scott case, in which he said specifically that African Americans, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically African Americans, or not African Americans, but slaves are nothing more than a door on a doorknob, and so that was the controversy with Dred Scott. So that's the point of chattel slavery. And so when we say, and again, going back to the 13th Amendment, it's basically, it eliminates chattel slavery, but it still does not ban slavery overall, or just the general idea of it. And so when we talk about the prison system, the reason why we relate it to that is because prisoners are, whether you know it or not, they are laboring in the prison system, whether they're making your, your license plates numbers, or even just last year, there was controversy in the state of New York when prisoners were forced to make hand sanitizer, right? And so obviously they're not getting compensated for that, or maybe it's just a few cents, which is really no compensation. So that's why we relate. It's still a form of slavery because you're not being compensated for the services that you're providing. And also, obviously that goes into other things. If you really want to get deep into it, when we talk about, the NCAA and paying, college athletes and that type of thing. So you can get really deep into it, but for the purposes of this discussion, chattel slavery and what we have today, slavery is still alive and well is the point I'm trying to make. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Adejumo. I'd like now to ask Carl Van Ness to provide some historical background about some key UF events that are tied to Black heritage. Many of them have anniversaries that we either just recognized or we have anniversary celebrations in the next couple of years. So I'd like Carl to talk a little bit more now about UF history and some Black heritage events there. Carl?
Sure. Thank you, Ashley. First of all, happy Juneteenth, everyone. This past April, the University of Florida commemorated the 50th anniversary of an event known as Black Thursday, when over 60 protesters were arrested in Tigard Hall. But in order to understand why this occurred, we need to reflect on the years leading up to that protest. It's difficult to state categorically when the campaign to desegregate Florida's public universities began, but we usually started in 1949, when 6 African Americans applied to attend the University of Florida's College of Law and were, of course, were refused admittance. By the time their case reached the United States Supreme Court in 1956, there was only one of the original 6 petitioners remaining, and that was Virgil Hawkins. The Supreme Court ruled that Hawkins was entitled to prompt admission to the College of Law, but that didn't happen. Instead, the state of Florida found other ways to stall. And in 1958, Virgil Hawkins withdrew his application, but with the assurance that the state would no longer challenge future applicants. And in that same year, George Stark entered the College of Law as the first African American to attend the University of Florida. Unlike Mississippi and Alabama, there were no demonstrations by segregationists, no one blocked the classroom door, and it all went down very quietly. From 1958 to 1962, admission was limited to the professional schools in the graduate program. Desegregation of the undergraduate program came in 1962, and next year we'll be noting the 60th anniversary of that. In 1968, 10 years after George Stark enrolled, there were still only about 100 Black students at the University of Florida. I often refer to the years 1958 through 1968 as a lost decade. There was so much that could have been done, that should have been done, but very little action was taken. Integration during this period was passive. There was no attempt to recruit Black students and no measures taken to retain those that came. Many who came here left early. They simply could not deal with the environment, and they received their degrees elsewhere. The students who stayed found a campus that was unfriendly at best and hostile at worst. The student culture that they faced had been shaped by decades of white Southern students. Dixie was an official fight song played before the football games. And there were other manifestations of that white Southern heritage. Most notorious was the Kappa Alpha Plantation Ball, in which Kappa Alpha members dressed as Confederate soldiers and entertained their dates, and often employed African Americans from the local community to serve as slaves. As bad as it was on campus, Black students who ventured off campus found a community that was even more hostile. In 1968, African American students organized the Black Student Union and began to push for significant change. In years of frustration were rapidly coming to the surface. In 1971, BSU presented President Stephen C. O'Connell with a list of demands. I don't have time to read all those demands, but if you go to any of the sources that we provided that are related to Black Thursday, you'll find those demands listed there. President O'Connell thought the demands were unreasonable. And while he engaged in a dialogue with BSU, the dialogue did not produce any results. BSU then staged a sit-in at his office on April 15th, which is a Thursday. The protesters were told to leave or they'd be arrested. They left, they had a discussion, and then some came back and sat down again and were arrested. In the meantime, word had spread to the campus that Black students were protesting over at Tigard Hall. And over the course of several hours, about 1,500 students, mostly white, came out in support. The students occupied Tigard Hall, and began to voice their support for the Black students. They were eventually told to leave. Most did, but some refused to leave, and there were more arrests. The demonstration then goes outside Tigard Hall, and there's all these confrontations with the police. There's tear gas, mace, and then there's more arrests. In all, 66 students were arrested. The protesters demanded amnesty for those arrested. O'Connell refused to do that, and in the ensuing weeks, 123 Black students, or about 1/3 of the Black student population at the time, withdrew from the school. And they did so in a very public way. They did not go quietly into that good night. They resigned in groups down at the registrar's office and did so in front of the press. Briefly put, Black Thursday was a pivotal moment in UF history. The protest received a lot of unfavorable media attention, and changes began to occur at UF. The first concession from O'Connell was the establishment of the IBC, which was one of the BSU demands. The university's recruitment program was ramped up. Again, that was another BSU demand. But the most dramatic changes occur in student life, both Black and white. Among white students, white Southerners no longer dominate by the late 1970s. The typical white student in 1978 had parents who grew up outside the South, and this reflects the kind of demographic changes that are occurring in Florida at the time. Simultaneously, Black students were creating their own cultural spaces and identities. Some of those spaces were physical, as in the IBC. Some were cultural, as in music and sports. Some were social and political, as in Greek life and student government. Within 2 years after Black Thursday, Sam Taylor, a participant in Black Thursday, is elected student body president. We have a Black quarterback, Don Gaffney, a Black homecoming queen, Cynthia Mays, and the university seems to be moving in the right direction. I'm going to stop here, but we need to note that the dramatic changes that occurred in the 1970s were not sustained over the years. Just as the 1960s were a lost decade, we've lost momentum in more recent years. The student activism and involvement that we're seeing today, I think, reflects the institutional complacency of the previous decade. And I'll stop there.
Carl, thank you very much for the historical context and certainly bringing us into today. I'd like to bring Sharice and Spencer into the conversation. As Carl mentioned, Black Thursday 50 years ago and all of what was going on at that time, I do want to focus on the fact that while there has been progress, the Black student experience at UF in 2021 is not without its challenges. One of the real demands from the BSU that sticks out in my mind and continues to resonate with me is that BSU asked that 500 of the 2,800 incoming freshmen be Black, which would have raised the percentage of Black students to 17.8% of the UF population. Black student enrollment is still far below that threshold today at just shy of 6%. So can you talk to us about the current Black student experience at UF and the opportunities that exist for broad engagement across the UF community to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Sharice, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So I would describe especially my personal experience at UF as rewarding but often strenuous. I can say that it can be difficult to sit in classes, to attend UF-wide events, to even just walk around campus and not see people that look like you. It can be kind of alienating at times as well. And that is really the main reason that I did get involved with BSU, was to not only find my community, but to also join an organization that was helping build that broader community for Black students on campus. So from hosting events to occupying spaces such as Rights Union and feeling comfortable when I go into those spaces, no matter what the background of those spaces may be. And so even in terms of resources at UF, I think that is what would make it a rewarding experience. So from even having the IBC and having it be rebuilt and being recognized and being able to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of Black Thursday at the IBC and seeing that come full circle, as well as even the recognition of Black Thursday overall, and even the recognition of Black Greek-led organizations, which Spencer may be able to talk a little bit more about. But I think really it's nice to see the university begin to move in the direction of change. But at the end of the day, it really is up to, especially the Black students and faculty, to continue to hold the university accountable, which the Black Student Union has aim to do and will continue to do. We talked a little bit about the demands that were given on Black Thursday, but we also submitted a list of demands last year to the university, including name tags for Black faculty and staff on campus so that people can be able to recognize them and refer to them properly by their names, to even recognizing racial incidents that have happened on campus and holding those students accountable. So I think that while we can applaud the university for what they have done in terms of Black Thursday and what they have done so far, it's important to continue that accountability so that we as current Black students can continue to feel comfortable and know that our university is representing us, as well as to present and the university in such a manner that incoming Black students, whoever may be looking to apply to the University of Florida, can truly feel comfortable and can have a very positive Black experience and not have to feel that alienation or any form of backlash from university or any other student. So with that, I will pass it off to Spencer.
Wow, how do I follow that up? That was amazing. Well, I'll just go ahead and get right on into it. So I currently serve as a Florida Cicerone, and in our training, we had to tour with an older Florida Cicerone. And he kind of to our tour group, he talked about his experience of going out to Colorado and running into a gator. And kind of one of the things that he highlighted was the fact that his mom was a gator, his grandparents were gators and everything. And that one of the really, really cool aspects was that the student experience for him had been the same throughout the years. And I am also in that same boat. Both of my parents went to the University of Florida, and hearing their stories, I cannot say the same. Just some of the things that they started, we have the Florida Invitational Step show, and just some of the things that they were able to do with bringing out performers like the Notorious B.I.G. We can talk about Greek life. Like I recently went to a reunion for my chapter and everything, and I'm telling people the numbers of our chapter. It's really crazy to think that there are more brothers in Zeta Kappa back in the 1980s and 90s than there is in all of NPHC right now, NPHC being the National Panelists Council, which is made up of 9 organizations. I will say, continuing on from that and kind of building off the things that Sharice said, in terms of the demands that were made on Black Thursday and the demands that we recently released, if you actually compare them side by side, a lot of the demands are actually the same. And so it's really unfortunate that we are still dealing with some of the same things, that Black enrollment and students actually not only attending this university and feeling comfortable. I'm also part of an organization called the Black Male Excellence Network. And a lot of the Black men that have been recruited to the University of Florida are on athletic teams and don't really get to participate in the Black culture that we have here at the University of Florida. It's why one of the programs like Beeman is so influential as it is, because there just isn't that many people who look like me, who go through the same experience as me as a Black man going to BSU. If you look at the leadership within BSU, a lot of the positions are made up of Black women and everything. And so that's also something that we have to fight against. And most of my classes, and almost all of my classes here at the University of Florida, I'm the only Black male student, and most times I'm the only Black student. And one of the things that I don't feel like people really recognize is just the mental toll that takes, and just how you are perceived, that hey, that I'm gonna come in here in a suit and everything like that because of the way that I may be perceived, or oh, I'm gonna may not ask a question and everything because I don't want people to think people who look like me may be less intelligent or something like that. And it's just so many of these things that you have to think about before you even step in the room, that you have to be constantly cognizant. I believe the last thing I'll go ahead and speak on is that we have this new phrase that we like to harp on: diversity and inclusion, diversity and inclusion. And personally, I understand the conversation, but I really think it's very performative. I think with just like the summer and people posting like the black squares and everything, it allowed people to be a part of the conversation and part of the discussion and be like, oh, look at me, look what I'm doing. And you're not actually doing anything. There's no action behind the diversity and inclusion. It's crazy for me. I'm an accounting major, going to people's website and have whole things talking about diversity and inclusion, but talking about none of the actual action that they did. I believe we have to stop having just discussions and start moving and taking it a step forward and doing like, what are we doing? What like money needs to be donated, money needs to be put in these places, and not only money needs to be put in these places, but there needs to be active recruitment processes in place in order to bring Black students to the University of Florida and make sure that we're retaining them and like having a student experience that they can enjoy that may look different from other communities on campus. And with that being said, I yield my time back to Ms. Heather.
Sharice and Spencer, thank you for that. I certainly can relate to your comments as a former student. And just a couple of follow-ups. Sharice, if you're comfortable, I would encourage you to share the BSU letter in the chat so that our audience can read it. I think the parallels that you and Spencer have made between the request of BSU from Black Thursday to now, and just kind of how there are still significant challenges that we need to address. Spencer, I'll say to you, I think in terms of solutions, absolutely. Part of the larger national dialogue is how do we move from performative PR, from symbols. Some may say that the adding of a national holiday is an extension of the symbolism without long-term action. So I think that is also a great point. The last point I would make and comment to what you said, a little moment of levity that you're making me feel old. If your parents were bringing Notorious B.I.G. to campus, that was during my time. So I just wanted to reflect on, I think I went to school with your parents. So thank you for your comments. And Heather, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Spencer and Sharice, for those comments. And I kind of want to tie in some things that you both mentioned as we bring Quentin into the conversation. Talked about the importance of finding and broadening a community for Black students and also having BSU and Black faculty serve as accountability for the university. Realizing the important connection between the student experience and the alumni experience. Quentin, can you speak as to how the ABA is aiming to connect and support current and/or prospective students through your partnerships with admissions and the CCC?
Sure, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say on behalf of our president, Robin Hankerson, I am glad to be here with everyone. And like Jocelyn said, I was at that Biggie concert, so I probably went to school with your parents as well. So that brought back memories. And that kind of ties in, those memories kind of tie into what ABA is all about, which is to be the premier organization for Black alumni and bringing us back to the university to share in those memories. And once we get that connection and our association grows in association, then we can be more involved in the campus life of the students, connecting with admissions like we do with the student recruitment conference to bring more students into the university. And we do that each year. In the past, we've done it in conjunction with the Florida Invitational Step Show weekend, which is usually in the spring. This year we held a virtual event, and last year, you know, we had a lot of challenges as well, which we also held it virtually. But we've been able to have a breakthrough in some of that communication with the university admissions office. Part of the prior presentation here today was some discussion about the recruitment aspect of admissions to UF. And in the 70s and in the 90s when I went, and as compared to what's going on today, I believe that the recruitment side of the admissions office should be stepping up their game to recruit more Black students so we can increase those numbers, because like the young man said, the diversity inclusion is great to talk about and great to read about, but we need to have some action on those. And without the recruitment of those Black students, particularly Black males, and he brought up a very good point. I won't call out our chapter, but we have a chapter in our association that posted a picture this morning, which was a very great picture. And some of them are on this call today. But the board comprised totally of women, great women. I know them all. It's not to say anything negative against that. It's to say that we need to have more Black males at UF. And one of the accolades of Dr. Ajumo was that he discusses and teaches on the Black masculinity, which is a whole nother subject I won't go into, but I think that ties into a lot of the things Spencer was saying. And we want to make sure that the young men that we recruit, and we also have a program with ABA for the chapters, Destination ABA, where we see a lot of the students who have been accepted into the university, both male and female Black students, and they have a decision to make at that point, because as you all know, it's very difficult these days to get into University of Florida. So if you've been accepted to UF, you've probably been accepted to a number of top universities across the country. So part of that ability to get these students to actually enroll into UF is the things that we're talking about, the experience, hearing from students such as the two great students we have on today, and hearing from alumni who we need to be more active in. Our alumni association brings that community together and puts our arms around those students who are making that decision, their parents, making them feel comfortable with where they're sending their students to. So we have been, over the last several years that I've been personally involved with the National ABA, stepping up our game to help get more students to UF, and holding and continuing to hold some of the people who have direct access to those students more accountable to that.
Quentin, thank you for that. I want to piggyback on the comments that you and many of our panelists have made about actions and accountability. And so I'd like to pose a question to each of our panelists, and I'd ask that everyone give their top action item, but what can the broader University of Florida community do to help move beyond symbolic gestures, and Spencer, as you said, performative PR, in my humble view, to meaningful, sustainable progress and change? So let's do a round robin. Dr. Ajumo, we'll start with you, and then Carl, and go in the order of our panel. One action item that you think we can do to move forward.
I think that the university, something tangible that they can do is include a post-exit survey of students who graduate and or leave the university for whatever reason. And the reason why I say that is because, we know that there's a problem. We know that there's a problem that Black students, forget the whole diversity, inclusion, and belonging, Black students just do not feel safe at the University of Florida. And so what we need is data to capture just the overall student experience from all spectrums, from all students. And then we need to be able to aggregate that by demographics of race, ethnicity, age, and that needs to be readily public data that's readily available. And it's a simple solution to do it. You could do it in one.uf. Before you get your diploma, you have to complete the survey. You see what I'm saying? Or before the last of your you exiting from the University of Florida, you have to, or if you want the transcript, you have to complete this survey. So something simple, tangible, And then we can begin to really move to some tangible solutions and stop shooting in the dark, based off of gut feeling or what this person in this higher up position says, and they don't really have the best interests of these students at heart. So.
Thank you, Carl.
I think the university and all universities nationwide need to stop their obsession with rankings. I think rankings are what's driving a lot of what's going on in higher education. And there are some built-in biases to those rankings because, in order to go up in the ranks of the U.S. News and World Report, they're looking at things like merit scholars and things like that. They're not looking at the total picture. They're not looking at the campus environment, and that would be the biggest thing, I think. Just kind of reorient our way of looking at how we're making progress, and not be dictated by a ranking in a national magazine.
Thank you, Carl. Charisse, and just for our audience, I want to highlight that Charisse has posted the BSU letter in the chat. If you have not taken a look at that, please do so. Charisse, floor is yours.
Thank you. So something that I would say the university can do is listen to students. I think that in the past, the university has tried to package up a solution to us and hand it off to us without actually hearing the feedback from the students, even with the plan for the future that President Fox sent out last summer with a lot of task force and committees and conversations. But that doesn't take into account the actual student experience, as Dr. Adejimo mentioned, but two, it doesn't actually provide any tangible change, whereas the students are creating a list of demands that have tangible change within them and it has garnered support from not only Black students on campus, but from a multitude of students on campus. So I think the university can listen to what the students want to see and begin to use that to guide whatever changes they want to make.
Thank you. Spencer.
I'm thinking about potential solutions and I'm torn. We've had conversations about it in like multiple organizations. I'm torn between, I know that they're moving towards like race blind admission, but I believe getting to a percentage level at the University of Florida that's reflective of even the national average, because I believe the state average is actually higher than the national average. What it ultimately comes down to is you see just some of the things that are like culturally specific to the Black community and just kind of like how prolific just some of the events we've had at the University of Florida are no longer being able to exist and everything because we simply do not have enough students who are applying for those positions and have like the overall level of experience to be able to fulfill those positions. So it's either that, and that may not be tangible, but I guess the other one would potentially be, I would say, moving like for on-campus housing. I feel like one of your first years is probably your most influential. Like it's really unfortunate meeting Black students who are in their third year, fourth year and everything like that. And just like, hey, I don't know about the Black community at the University of Florida. I don't know about the IBC. I don't know about the significance of Black Thursday. So I would say giving the Graham area is home to the Black cultural living learning community. I served as the RA for the Black cultural living learning community, and giving those students like preferential treatment where you automatically, if you are a Black student, get put like in that community and everything, and you get the opportunity to opt out. Why this is important is because comparing my parents' experience, a lot of them lived on campus. Like a lot of them would be here for 5-6 years getting their degree and everything and lived on campus all 5-6 years. And so you have a really, really tight-knit community, what they recently described almost as like an HBCU experience, because they were consistently surrounded by Black people, even though the percentages may have been comparable to then. I believe this, again, kind of like that word of mouth. Oh, there's this going on at the BEC. Oh, there's this going on here. And so you have and build that community. And if you don't want to be in that community, that is your choice and your like decision to move off if you so choose and everything. But at least have that option where you kind of get plugged into programs such as Pledging to Advance Academic Capacity Together, the Leadership Development Institute, Black Student Union in your first year. And so that you can be an active contributor throughout your time here at the University of Florida.
If I may, can I say something? Just one more thing to add. One thing that really bothers me is that this task of increasing student enrollment is being put on the Black Alumni Association. That is, I'm sorry, but that is an admissions, it comes down from the top. President Fox, Board of Trustees, yes, I am saying it. That is not the responsibility of the Black Alumni Association. That is admissions office, and that is on the administrators that are in charge of retention. You know, so this whole notion of, oh, we gotta shoehorn it on a no, it's that this is an institutional wide problem and it needs to be solved by the administrators of the institution. That is not on the Black Alumni Association. So that's something for the past 10 years that I've been here, that's something that has really bothered me, this passing of the buck, and nothing gets, actually the problem gets worse. So that's something that needs to be said. I mean, it's almost like the notion of who's policing the police, who's holding these administrators accountable for only 773 Black males at the University of Florida. That is terrible. And, you know, and then this whole talk about increasing of diversity. I mean, look at the African American Studies program. You know, they said that we was going to get 5 additional full-time tenure track professors. And I sent an email and I said, hey, what's going on with it? We had a search for this semester and I can't get a straight answer of what's going on with those positions. How are you going to attract students here and you don't even have the requisite faculty here who looks like them to keep them interested in attending this university? So, you know, it's just a lot of frustration. I feel like a lot of, you know, we kind of talk around the problem, and I'm glad for this forum to get directly to the issue. But now it's time to really start talking directly. And I just want to say it's not the responsibility of Black Alumni Association to recruit and retain Black students. That is the administrator's job, and they need to do their job.
Dr. Jumo, I want to comment on that. I do want to get to you, Quentin. If you allow me to take just a quick moment of moderator privilege, I want to weigh in on this point. So Dr. Jumo, I could not agree with you more. There are many members of both the National Board and the Alumni Association Board and students who have made the exact point that you have made. Several years ago at the Alumni Association, we were in an admissions committee meeting, and Heather knows what I'm going to say. Because I repeat this point about Black student enrollment, retention, engagement. The point is, and this is not a statement that I made, but one of my esteemed colleagues, oppressed people cannot resolve their own oppression. And I want to make that statement here because it goes to the point that you are making. And it's the point that we have talked about many times at the Alumni Association level and beyond, that this cannot be resolved by the Association of Black Alumni acting, you know, as the conduit to resolve all issues of Black students, Black faculty, Black culture at the University of Florida. So I just want you to know there is a whole other effort and community working within our community and beyond, working to make this point to our president, to administrators, to everyone at the University of Florida, because it is exactly right. So Quentin, hopefully this is an alley-oop to you to weigh in, and thank you for that moment of
no problem. I agree with both of you. I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, University of Florida is a research institution. So all the ways to collect data on problems, there's somebody at that university that knows how to go about doing that. And as far as the ABA, I agree 100%. And I've told people that we are not admissions. We cannot get students to go there. We can assist the school because we love the school, and we use our free time because we're all volunteers to help, to relay our experience, positive and negative. But if you went, when I went, it was mostly positive. So I agree with everyone. that just spoke that, you know, we have to hold the people who are getting paid to do these things to do these things. And if they're not doing these things, they need to be replaced with somebody who will. This is an institution. You know, the institution has survived many people over the years since 1853. You know, people have come, people have gone, but the problem remains to a large extent. So it's not the individuals that needs to change, it's the institution, and the people who are there now need to recognize that the things you all have said are an issue, and those things need to be addressed. And we have the brain power, we have the manpower, the woman power, the people power to give the power to the people to do that.
Thank you, Quentin. I want to underscore, and I know Heather, I want you to jump in here too. I want to underscore what you said. Every person on this panel is participating from the standpoint of we love the University of Florida. And this relates to one of the questions in the chat about the emotional labor involved in trying to make the University of Florida and the community, the broader community, better for all of us. And yes, it does require a lot of work, a lot of volunteer time. It really is significant in terms of the contributions that each of you make to the University of Florida. So I just want to thank you for all that you do in your day jobs, and then all that you do in addition to your day jobs to try and make our University of Florida community better. So as a segue into the next question, so JR, I hope that, that was a shout out to you on the emotional labor point. It is significant. But I want to transition a little bit because we have a number of questions about enrollment and what has driven the decrease in Black student enrollment from the high of 10% in 2010 to just shy of 6% in 2019. And as a reminder, BSU demanded 50 years ago that we get to a percentage of 17.8. So we have never quite come close to meeting that. So Carl, I'd like for you to step in here a little bit and talk to us about, I know there was some additional historical context that you wanted to give us, but one context that I wanted to draw pretty directly in terms of what has happened regarding student enrollment, because it happened while I was there as a student, is the One Florida initiative that came from Ward Connerly in California. I was student body vice president, led the protests in the Capitol in Tallahassee against this initiative. I, for one, continue to believe that this has had a negative, extraordinarily negative impact on Black student enrollment and the enrollment of other students of color. So can you talk, but particularly, I want to be very clear, the biggest negative impact has been on Black students. So can you talk a little bit about One Florida and how you see that in historical context?
Yeah, sure. I mean, One Florida, I mean, it's not a coincidence that in Florida, Black enrollment decreases at this shortly after the implementation of that. It also occurs at the same time that Jeb Bush is launching his attacks on the Florida Board of Regents, and we go through this whole change, institutional change. And one of the arguments made for maintaining the Board of Regents was that, these were like, this is beyond an institutional problem. This is a state problem. This is a national problem. And one of the arguments made for retaining the Board of Regents was that the Board of Regents would be better able to guide the state through the enrollment process, and emphasize that state universities need to reflect their respective communities. But there's no doubt that Jeb Bush's attacks on affirmative action had a dramatic effect on enrollment. But I would also point out that enrollment, Black enrollment, has gone down nationwide. It's not just a problem here in the state; it's a national problem as well.
I have to disagree with you there, Carl. I would challenge that and say that it's very nuanced when you talk about Black enrollment nationally. But all we can do is talk about what's going on here at the University of Florida. And there are
Absolutely.
other flagship schools here in the state of Florida in which Black enrollment has not gone down. And in fact, in other schools, whether you want to talk about UCF or you want to talk about other state schools, Black enrollment has actually increased between the years that we are discussing. If you want to talk about, like I say, and the most comparative institution, obviously, is as far as preeminence is Florida State. So my thing is, I just don't like it when we said, well, Black enrollment is down everywhere, so that's why it's down at UF. No, there's specific reasons why it is down at UF. It's not because the general notion that Black enrollment is down nationally. There are specific reasons why it is down here and it is up everywhere else in the state.
Sharice, I know you wanted to jump in, so please, the floor is yours.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that something that I could probably even pinpoint as a reason why Black enrollment is going down is simply because of the image of the university. As we kind of talked about the emotional labor last summer, while not only taking summer classes, but also having to deal with just being a Black person and the social injustices that were happening nonstop, we're also having to write these lists of demands to hold our university accountable. That's extremely strenuous because that is so much emotional labor on the students that should not have to happen at all, especially when the administration claims to be for the students. And then on top of that, people that have been admitted to the university or are looking to apply to the university, now they're looking at Black Student Union having to give this list of demands, having to hold the university accountable, and it automatically does not look like UF is a safe space for Black students. And so they're going to turn to other schools, other places, such as UCF, where there you don't have to see the students putting in this same labor to just see a little bit of reciprocity from the university. And I see Spencer has his hand up, so I'll pass off to him, I guess.
Spencer.
I will also say that, I don't know, Sharice, tell me if I'm wrong, but UF loves to put Black students in just advertisements. You see them everywhere. And it's just, to be honest, like what'd you say?
There are more Black students in advertisements than there are on the university campus.
That's kind of like where I was going at. It's almost I feel like, yes, I understand it's just like, hey, put them out there, like, and so they're visible, there's visibility there, but at the same time, it also comes off as disingenuous. And I feel like you're kind of, what is it called, trying to treat the symptoms instead of going at the root problem. Which is just, the fact is just, you shouldn't have to put Black students everywhere, just recruit more Black students and everything like that, like have that experience. People talk about their experience. Like, I know, like, back, especially back in like the 2000s, people talked about just like how amazing it was. I was just talking to one of my best friends and everything. My fraternity had a really big like weekend, usually to happen in the summer, and everybody, like, he said his mom didn't even go to college, lived in Jacksonville, and heard about the weekend. Like, people talk about the university being able to bring Notorious B.I.G. before he even got big. Some of the things, being able to have the largest step show in the southeastern region, and like in the even in like the country, like, it is a major thing for us to be able to get the dollars that we get. Like, the University of Florida produces excellence, and that is not like and especially both outside the Black community and inside the Black community. And again, it kind of just goes back to not having the students to kind of continue that culture and really fund the programs and just the legacy that's been left behind by previous generations.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for this, and being mindful of time. I definitely want to say thank you to everybody for having these candid conversations today. There's been several important conversations, both from an administrative perspective, from an alumni perspective, from a student perspective, that I think having those dialogues and those conversations, not just having them, being comfortable having them, being comfortable bringing them to bear, but then also knowing there needs to be action on the back end to do that. I think there's lots of room for growth that we have from a university perspective in all of the areas that I mentioned. Obviously, a lot of the concerns that were raised here today are ones that are relevant and pertinent and timely, and now is the time for us to be able to act as a university and make it. One of the things that resonated with me was it's not safe to be a Black student at the University of Florida, and that is something in 2021 that we definitely need to make sure that it is a priority, not just for Association of Black Alumni, but it's a priority from leadership and above. So I thank everybody for the candid conversations today. And I kind of want to wrap up the conversation and just say, from each panelist, if you could provide maybe the top remarks, final thoughts that you have, that you would love to be able to share with those of us that are joining on the webinar and on Facebook, that maybe even you think could help inspire and continue any sort of change that started, and make sure that there's actionable things that happen on the back end. So I will start with, I'll go backwards and I'll start with Quentin.
Great. I'll go back to the beginning when we were talking about Juneteenth. A little bit about my professional background. I represent a lot of municipalities here in Broward County, and part of that process over the last year, I've prepared a number of Juneteenth ordinances, creating it as a local holiday. What happened yesterday is Juneteenth was created as a federal holiday. And as you know, several businesses, universities, local schools don't celebrate every federal holiday. So if you want Juneteenth to be recognized in your local area, if you're listening to this webinar, you need to lobby your local officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. I will go to Dr. Adejumo.
Yes, so I would just say continue to, address and really reflect and fight white supremacy. I think that's the undercurrent of all of that, all of this that we've talking about, the powers to be wanting to maintain the social order, the order of what's going on. So I would say continue to reflect and fight that, continue to create solutions. And as far as specifically for the University of Florida, I would say don't let this talk just go out one ear, go in one ear and go out the other. Please take the steps to get to the tangible solutions, because if not, before you know it, the only Black students that's going to be here are athletes. So.
Can I just say one more thing, and just to give a plug? If you're an alumni watching, join the Alumni Association and check the box for Black alumni. We will be having our Black alumni reunion homecoming weekend. We have some great things planned. We're going to be in person, so please come and join. Students, we will have opportunities for your engagement with the alumni as well. We're trying to do better with that. I know that's been an issue in the past, so we are aware. We are trying to be better and treat you all like the adults and future alumni in our Alumni Association that you are. Thank you.
Love that plug, Quentin. Thank you. I will go to Carl next.
I'm going to keep it simple. Learn from history. Learn about the events of April 15th, 1971. I think there are lessons to be learned there in terms of what happened then and how things progressed and how they didn't progress. History can always teach us lessons.
Great, thank you. Spencer, and then we'll end with Sharice.
Okay. Again, thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate y'all having me today. Thank you. One of my favorite podcasts on YouTube is called I Am Athletes, and Fred Taylor, a running back for the University of Florida, has this saying that exposure leads to expansion. And so I will say, while this panel is great and the discussion that we had today is great, I feel like you have to educate yourself on your own, and don't just expect people in marginalized communities to teach you everything. You have to do those things where you go out and you learn about Black Thursday. You learn about just kind of like some of the things that are going on. And like, if you do decide to ask, like genuinely ask, like come from like a good place. But I definitely feel like doing things like watching the 13th documentary, watching the making of the IBC documentary that's on YouTube, things that it's available and it's out there. It's just for those who go and like seize it and look for it. So that's how you can do it. And so like after you've been exposed to those things, I feel like you're a better advocate and you have a better understanding for people and communities or from experiences that don't reflect your own.
Very well said, Spencer. And I agree. The education can't come from the marginalized communities. They have to come from people outside that are actively seeking that information. So that was a great point, Spencer. Thank you. Charisse, final thoughts.
So something that I would say, and thank you all for having me here today, is to prioritize community, because at the end of the day, this can be so much for an individual to take on by themselves. And so lean into the spaces that are available to you. So whether that be sending your student or potential students to the Black Student Union, going to the Association of Black Alumni, leaning into these communities that can not only help educate you, whether it be through events or by directing you to resources, but can also just provide the support for as you continue to operate and navigate these different spaces and these different trials that we go through as Black people.
Heather, if I could just jump in to close us out, I want to end where I began, which is hearts and minds. I want to thank each of our panelists for putting their full hearts and love for the University of Florida on display, and exposing us to the joys, the hurts, the pains, the frustrations, so that we can all, everybody on this webinar and beyond, can put our minds to the action that is required to move our University of Florida community forward and our world forward. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. Know that this is a beginning and a conversation. And a year from now, hopefully we can come back and have a conversation about what we did, what we acted upon to move the University of Florida forward. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you for the audience joining us today, and happy Juneteenth, everyone.